who I am. Now if somebody would...
Hi there, welcome to another T.A.R.A. Sessions. I'm T.A.R.A. Shannon, and today my very special guest is Naledi, a wonderful, very talented recording artist, singer-songwriter from here in Ottawa. Thanks for being in the hot seat today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's very nice here, very cozy.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
I always have to explain to people, you're coming out to the country.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a drive, but not that far.
Yeah, my little hatchback was like, should we be doing this?
Where are we going?
Are we
going to be murdered?
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. So we're having conversations all about, conversations about coming into knowing who you are, because the single I have out now is I Know Who I Am. And it's just conversations about how music has helped. Music has really helped me see a lot about myself and discover things about myself. Sometimes I didn't want to see, and sometimes that I liked to see. And it's really, shaped sort of the expansion of who I am, and just really leaning in and coming into who I am more authentically. So kind of coming away from the roles that I believed I was supposed to be playing, and living my life under these titles and labels, and not necessarily authentically to myself.
Preach.
And so I figured that this is not a unique thing to myself, and that a lot of artists that I work with and really admire, like yourself, I just thought you'd be a great hang in general, and just to have a good conversation, because you went through a name change recently, which is really what got my attention.
Yeah.
And then I had a quick chat with you, and I was like, this is so interesting. Come on my little YouTube thing and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So before we get to that big part,
Sure.
fill people in on your musical journey. When did music start for you?
I always find that to try and sum that up, I think for any artist is quite a daunting question, because at the end of the day you're like, music was in me my whole life. I've always been a musician. And so growing up, I grew up predominantly in Botswana, and growing up there, in Botswana, in a lot of non-Western places, the focus on education, and this focus on a specific direction of education and finding a career that is established and quote unquote regular, is really enmeshed in your upbringing. And so, I always did music in high school, and I was always singing, and music was such a big part of my home life. My parents love all kinds of music, and there's always music playing. And my dad played guitar as well. My mom could not hold a tune to save her life, but she loved listening to music. We all need people who listen.
Yes.
But my dad, when we were growing up, would always, I can even hear the sound of his guitar case opening, because almost on a nightly basis, he would pull out his guitar and play songs for me and my sister. And a lot of the songs were songs that he wrote. And it kind of enforced this idea of telling your story in a medium, right? So I didn't realize it was kind of adding those layers to myself and my the way that I express myself, but clearly it had a big impact. So there was this kind of juxtaposition of loving expression through art, loving expression through music and through writing, in contrast to going down the path of a stable stereotypical career. So I personally, long story long, I feel like I didn't really delve into pursuing music until a little bit later in life, in first or second years, when I started to open my eyes to the prospect that could be something I go down and pursue.
That was credible. It's actually really interesting to hear you say that, because I would have guessed that whole attitude towards choosing the arts as a career or making music and be your living would be an attitude exclusive to North America, because that it is less than or not a credible or stable way to make a living. But that's the same. That was the same messaging.
Definitely, and competitive schools as well. The high school all the schools that I went to were extremely academically competitive. There's this you see these high school movies in Western high school movies where it's the nerdy kids are losers. Whereas in my school, if you weren't getting good grades, there was something wrong with you. So
it was cool.
It was the thing to do.
Right.
Get the scholarships, get good grades. Succeed in school, succeed in life. And to the point where in my school, and I mean in Botswana in general, like when you graduated from high school, or we had something called like A levels, which is in Britain as well. It's like CEGEP.
Okay.
Your marks were posted downtown in the main
Publicly?
square. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Is this like?
I don't know. I think it still happens.
Everybody's mark,
Oh,
or
yeah.
only like the honor roll?
No. Everyone's.
So
mark.
was it like a public shaming?
I mean, I guess like by execution,
Yeah.
it was, but like it was just more like the convenience of getting your marks out there in the most convenient, transparent way. And it was just how it was done, right? Like,
Wow.
oh yeah, terrifying. Oh my gosh.
So then, how old were you when you came here?
I came to Canada when I was 20.
Oh, really?
20, yes.
Wow, I had no idea.
20.
Yeah, I would have guessed much younger, but 20 is pretty like. So what brought you here?
University.
Okay.
Yeah, so I came, my dad is Canadian, and so I have Canadian citizenship. So,
Okay. Oh, that's convenient. Then that was
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Okay,
pretty
cool.
convenient.
So what did you start studying in university?
Sociology and gender
Okay.
studies. Very musically driven. Yes.
But then you switched. You made a change.
I mean, again, I think a lot of kids who have immigrant parents or immigrant kids who came to Canada kind of can relate to the idea that the parents want you to establish yourself and be able to thrive in like a new country, right? So I just wanted to get that degree under my belt, and yeah, it was like the thing to do.
I know. I have that conversation with artists all the time about the messaging that we receive from parents, you know,
Oh,
or
the
what
backup plans.
The backup plans,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I'm working on this. I'm just finishing this book that's like a pocket guide to music creators and just surviving a life as a music creator. And there's like this mood index, this thought mood index. Did somebody tell you to get a real job today? Turn to page 12. Did somebody ask you what your backup plan was? Turn to page 20. Because there's this common, so common, all this messaging that we get, and there is, and I've had parents in here for consultations with their kid, like the artist is just like, I just want to make music, and they're trying to find a solution in the family unit, and the parents are like, fine, but they want the kid to get the degree because it gives
Just
the
in
parents
case.
the sense of security.
Yes, for sure.
And I'm saying to the kid, I'm like, they just want to know you're not going to live in their basement for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like that's
it.
It comes from a good place, but I think the immigrant thing is an extra layer of the opportunity. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have that experience directly, but it's like I want to give you a better opportunity than I had.
Yeah, just being able, and like it comes with so many other layers, and this is something that I talk about in terms of changing my name and sort of wanting to make more of a connection or maintain a connection to my heritage. Like it's not just about having the security of going down a stable route in terms of career, but it's also the notion of wanting your kid to assimilate and like fit in. Like you don't want the possibility of being that outcast, So there's like there's many layers to it, and it's not coming from a negative space. Maybe like the way it comes across can come out as negative or detrimental to the individual, but like at the end of the day, it's this. It comes down to like wanting to make sure that your kid is not.
It's survival.
Yeah.
Like it's understanding that,
that's it.
to connect to a society and assimilate to a society equals survival in a lot of cases. Because it is directly connected to getting a job.
That is it.
To where you can access to live. Like we live very much in a classist and a racist, still structured society.
Absolutely.
And racist in this, it is racist in the word that we use in a negative connotation, but it's racist in the sense that we still recognize and we other. Right?
Absolutely.
They are other, or you are other, or, this kind of stuff. So it's good instincts for parents to recognize all that and be like, I want to give you the best chance of survival.
That's definitely it. And yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. And that being said, like I have an older sister, it's just the two of us, and both of us are artists, and both of my parents really saw that this was not some frivolous hobby that like a lot of people can often associate with pursuing a career in the arts.
Yeah.
And saw that this was for myself, I think I can speak for my sister, it wasn't necessarily just wanting to pursue this thing. It was like the only thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Like this is the only path that I could see myself doing.
Yeah,
in this
it's a
world.
difference, I think, for parents to watch, because kids go through phases, right? Like, I mean, I have 7 of them. They all go through different lots of phases.
You have 7 phases. I was like, let's go.
No. I have 7 kids going through multiple phases. You know, but when you see in your child or anybody that the pursuit is not driven by, let's say, being rich and famous, which can be a motivator sometimes for some people that I see, and then when there's the recognition that it's just woven into the fabric of who you are, and you just can't imagine life without honoring that gift or that part of who you are. And then the secondary question is, how do I make a living doing this?
That's it.
Because one doesn't necessarily equal the other, as you well know. But you're the real deal. You're out there, and that's, you're doing all of the, I mean, I have so much respect for, all the artists and any artist that's choosing the path. But it's very, very difficult because there's not a lot of money in it.
No, there's not.
So you're constantly living in a state of, month to month, or the grantings. Thank God we have that in Canada, but it doesn't make for a very easy, secure path. The sense of security comes from the deep knowing of just who you are, and that this is part of your purpose.
Yeah, I think that's wholeheartedly 100% true, what you're saying. Like that is it right there. And yeah, I think one of the things that I experienced as a kind of a late bloomer in everything, like let's talk about my puberty if we want to, but late bloomer in terms of music is that like, a lot of stepping stones that you sometimes maybe go through too fast and don't realize, and then have to take a step back. And so I think, in terms of my own career, coming to Canada, learning very quickly that I want to fit in and kind of fit into this Western demographic that was kind of new to me, and choosing to, my name is Kimberly Naledi Sundstrom, and my Setswana family call me Naledi, and when I came here, I went by Kimberly, which a lot of my Canadian family call me, and it just made sense. And so that kind of influencing the direction of my music as well, So I don't have a musical background. Like I never took lessons or anything like that. So it was a lot of like self-taught, sitting in the depths of darkness, learning how to play guitar and learning, like listening to people that I admire and how to sing and stuff like that. So a long kind of, and a long but also very sharp a learning curve of like what kind of musician I want to be, and it was never necessarily about the content. I am who I am, and like you said, like music is the way that we kind of express ourselves and communicate how we navigate the world and how we experience the world as well, right? Like I think that, a lot of musicians can say the same thing, like the content that comes directly from your life and like your life experience. So yeah, I actually have just lost my train of thought.
Oh no, that's because everything you say is interesting, so it's all good. It's all good. But I wanted to ask, okay, so Kimberly Naledi Sundstrom. So I knew you first as Kimberly Sundstrom, and I had heard of you and singing. And you had, by the time I was back into the music scene, because I took a long break to raise those ridiculous amounts of children, I was just sort of getting to know the Ottawa scene, and your name came up all the time. And I remember.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. So okay. So you were doing music before, the 7 kids appeared. And how long were you doing, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no.
I feel like there's no information on like the depths of a lot of musicians, right?
Yes.
Like what happened? Tell me where you were.
Before, yeah. So quickly, my background was, so I played piano my whole life. So I'm a Royal Conservatory trained piano player.
Okay.
And I was a jazz saxophone player
at
McGill University. So
amazing.
that was my beginning of music. And I started writing songs when I was at McGill.
Okay.
And that's when I fell in love with songwriting.
Okay.
And so I pursued this recording art artist career.
Okay.
And back then, this would have been in 97 or so, 95, 97.
Cool.
So I put out 2 records, and then everybody's like, you need a record deal. I knew nothing about anything. I was like, I knew nothing about the business or anything. I was just like, people are like, you need a record deal, you need a record deal. And so that's what I pursued. And I was finally offered a record deal with a small label connected to a larger label in the States. And when they were walking me through what the expectation was, they're like, it's 2 years, no family, no friends. And I had 3 young children at the time.
Oh.
So I was like, I can't do any of this stuff you're asking, or like none of it, because I wanted to be a mom. I didn't want my role as mom or my calling as a mom to be affected by this.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to understand a life as a recording artist or touring artist was not going to be a fit for me.
Okay.
And so I focused on songwriting. And so I kind of built a niche where I was writing songs for organizations or events that needed a song written for them, which I could do from home. It didn't require any kind of touring and stuff like that, or a public, artist life. And then raised my kids, had 4 more. They all got into competitive hockey, and they're, I know, which
the farthest thing from.
I know. And it's like, if anybody listening knows, life as a competitive sport parent is all consuming. It's not an extracurricular thing. It's like, it was, and I loved it. I mean, I really loved it, but I was slowly losing myself through this process. And with their dad, we started a business back in 2001, and that we grew that into a big group of companies with, at one point, I think we had 150, 125 employees in 5 different cities. So it was very all-consuming.
Yeah.
And
that's 2 careers in itself right there.
Right?
Yeah.
It was. So there was not a lot of room for music in my life at all.
Okay.
And then I got really sick. And when I was recovering, I made a bucket list because I knew that I wasn't living. I was so unhappy. I was just deeply unhappy. And I was trying to do mom and wife and business owner and hockey mom, all these things. And I wasn't doing anything for me, T.A.R.A. And I had really disconnected from everything that sort of made me me or made me feel like me. And music was the core of that.
Yeah.
So I started bringing music back in my life. So this would have been back in 2014.
Okay.
And then that's when I started going to Nashville a lot, just to really learn about songwriting and try to get a deeper understanding of myself as a writer and just the craft of songwriting.
Okay.
Because at first as a songwriter, I was writing my own experiences and kind of like, bleed all over the piano but it was a very sort of personal experience. And then I would sing them sometimes for people, but I didn't really have an understanding as a writer of the relationship between the audience and me as the writer.
Creating that bubble and bringing people in.
That's right, like making it relatable. Yeah. So going from sort of impression to connection. And so that's what all that studying was about. And then, Jonathan, the butterfly child, do you remember him? So he used to live on the same street here. Okay. And he was the one who came into my life and sort of changed I say he's the reason for my now, because he was like, why aren't you making that record you always planned to make? Because I had written a song to raise money and awareness for him.
Yeah, I remember.
And he's like, well...
Or I know, I'm not saying
but the story of it. And so that's when I started back into the recording artist thing. Okay. So I recorded that, put it out, wrote that with Northeastern and put it out. And then I did a campaign, I did a press campaign. And so and then I did my first show to raise money for him. So that was sort of the beginning of me getting back into this life. So that's sort of the long version of why I was... And that question comes up a lot, because in Ottawa, in the scene, it's like people have heard of me now, but they're like, where were you all this time? Because I'm clearly not 20. Do you know what I mean? It's like, where were you for this whole chunk of time? I was raising babies.
I don't think it's necessarily associated with age, to be honest. I'm gonna squash that, what you just said. This is your show, right? But I'm gonna squash this because it's not necessarily about that. It's about the fact that you have got I'm gonna not swear. You've got your stuff together. Look at me censoring myself.
Oh,
you are welcome.
Make Jess's job easy.
But you've got your stuff together. So anything that you put out there is very well curated, right? So this is not necessarily an age thing, but it's about clearly you have you have perspective, you have experience, and so you don't see an artist, regardless of the age, come out of the box with that level of
Yeah.
like eloquence. So I think that's what
I
people
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
No, and I mean it. I'm not. I genuinely mean it. So
I appreciate it. I think it's because I think part of that was I had already sort of in my young 20s, not to make it about age, because I think you're right, it isn't about age.
Or at least it shouldn't be. Like,
but you more typically will watch the evolution or the progression of an artist in the public space, whereas I did more of that not in the public space. So by the time I came out to the public space, it appeared sort of more polished again.
Yeah.
And also business. I love business.
Yeah.
I love business. And so the music business.
One of these days we're going to talk.
Oh, I do. I love it. I'm fascinated by it.
I'm terrible at the business side of it.
And that's why I do the coaching I do. Because artists are like, man, I just want to write songs. I'm like, yeah, but do you want to eat?
I'm like...
Exactly. And it always fascinated me. So even before I officially had Willow Sound or the Syndicate, I would consult with people because it was amazing to me that artists didn't see themselves as a business. Yeah. Right? And that also not just not seeing themselves, but pushing against it.
Yeah, because it takes away from the artistry of it, right? Yeah. So I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I fully recognize that. Yeah.
And so my messaging and my coaching with artists is those two things are not in opposition of one another.
Yeah.
You can understand yourself and have true artistry and not like sell out, or because I'm like, it's not selling out, it's buying in. It's buying into paying your rent with music. Yeah. And there is a way to run your business as an artist without it sacrificing or without having to sort of bend or meld into an expectation. Mm-hmm. But there is a fundamental understanding of what is selling and why, and then you have the choice, right? Yeah. So I think my passion for business and music kind of came together, and so I like to do things well. And in fairness, I have the resources to, because we were successful in this other industry, in this business. Not every artist has access to the resources to elevate their product or compete on a certain sort of commercial level, because at the end of the day, it just costs money.
That's it.
It's super expensive. Yeah. So anyways, that's a big factor. So coming back to hearing about you and stuff like that, and I've seen you play a few times, and then fast forward, you were going by a new name.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm so fascinated by that for a couple of reasons, business reasons too, because you build up a brand or a recognition of your name. Yeah. So it's a big decision to change it. Yeah. So walk me through what was going through in your life at the time.
I mean, honestly, the decision kind of like felt for myself stupidly obvious. I was like, of course. And there's a few things that that transpired. And again, like I said, life kind of influences how you create and what you put out there as an artist. And the first, something that happened just before the pandemic, my mom passed away. My mom was from Botswana, and, was, the biggest tie that I had to my Botswana side, my heritage. And so I think grief is such a weird thing. You don't really realize what things are happening. It kind of feels like it's happening to you to some extent. And so, I was kind of going through the stages of grief and kind of having lots of different emotions, from like anger to rage. Those are kind of anger to rage to absolutely devastated, and like all of these things, and just not really having a place to put them. And so I was continuing doing music, and it was a pandemic, and like I'm a gigging artist, and all of the gigs were getting taken away because of necessary lockdowns. Understandable, but like also very devastating from an artist perspective who garners majority of my income from performing and touring and gigging. Kudos to anybody who went down the road of streaming, because that I have a huge respect for anybody who continues to do and did before the live streaming route, because that is a whole different beast in itself. And so when like performances started to come back, I was really elated, and there was a lot of positivity around like seeing live music happening. And my genre was kind of a folky neo soul genre that was influenced a lot by spending so much time in a Western demographic, because folk music is really well accepted and well recognized and appreciated in a lot of parts of Canada and a lot of parts of North America. and performing on stage with my acoustic guitar, performing as Kimberly Sundstrom at a festival. A woman came up to me, walked past me, and called me the N-word. And so in that moment, obviously it was like, I was extremely angry. I was literally performing. There was nothing I could do. And, you know, my first reaction was like deep. The sad thing was my first reaction was deep embarrassment, which makes no sense. And it's not the first time I've heard that word, you know, hurled at me. It's probably not going to be the last time. But in the perspective of all of the stuff, look at me censoring myself again, all of the stuff, it was too much for me. So I felt like I was on this, like, I had this, like, these options in front of me. And the biggest one was like, fine, I'm done. I'm not doing music anymore. If, like, I can be doing music for X amount of years, I think it was like 5 or 6 years at that point, and, you know, fitting into the demographic, we talked about assimilating and fitting into this demographic, fitting in as what I thought I was sitting at all the tables, the right tables. I thought I was fitting in. I thought I, like, had a voice. And, like, not that one moment shut everything down, but it just kind of put things into perspective, that there was something very big about myself that I was missing in my artistry. And that was, like, including, like, my heritage, which is a huge part of myself. And so I could either call it a day and be angry and devastated, or see the act for what it was. And it was somebody who had some serious anger and rage in them for whatever reason. That's none of my business. Like, you need to go to therapy. But also it was not that I want to say, like, I turned it into a positive, because no, that should never be a scenario that, no, it's not a scenario that anybody needs to go through. But it just kind of made me realize, like, I need to take a moment to myself and stop for a second and really see what kind of artist I want to be, and what kind of content I want to put that out there, and how I want to respect myself. And the way to do that was kind of delve deeper into my own heritage and kind of find ways to, like, keep that connection strong, especially with the consideration that my mom passed away. And I felt like that was a real, like, loss, not just because I lost my mom, but just a loss in terms of, like, an important connection.
I know who I am.